Hi, I'm Greg from Andover College Prep. And our discussion today is SAT versus ACT. We get that question every day. Which test should I take? The SAT, the ACT? Should I take both? A few things. First of all, from a college admission standpoint, there is no difference. Anyone who tells you that colleges prefer one test over the other is lying to you. They're using it for marketing purposes. Whether or not you take the SAT or the ACT does not make a difference. Colleges will accept either or. Both tests are very, very different. They're different in what exactly they're testing, and more specifically, they're different in the approach necessary to do well. The SAT is a reasoning test. The ACT is a time test. And what I mean by that is, the SAT is basically a test of how good you are at taking a test. It is very different than what students are used to seeing in school. And in fact, it uses test takers' assumptions as test takers against them. Students are used to tests being very straightforward. If you take a history class, for example, you just finished chapter 10, and that's what your test is on. Well, you know that all you need to study is chapter 10, and you know how the test is going to be formatted. You know specifically what is needed of you as a test taker. Once you've taken that test, you might need that knowledge later on for a final exam, but for the most part, everything you just learned about chapter 10 can be forgotten. The SAT is entirely different in the sense that it's testing skills rather than knowledge. In fact, students who take the SAT have 99% of the knowledge that they need in order to do well in the SAT. That 1% is vocabulary. Students know how to read. That takes care of the critical reading section. Students know how to do percents, fractions, basic arithmetic, middle school math, geometry, some algebra, basic algebra 1 and very basic algebra 2. And then on the grammar section, they need to know a few basic grammar rules and how to write an essay, I should say, for the writing section. So for the most part, the SAT is testing skills rather than knowledge. And it's all about understanding how the test is designed to get the student to pick the wrong answer. The ACT, on the other hand, is neither a test of knowledge nor a test of reasoning. It's a test of how quickly you can find an answer. The ACT contains 4 sections. It's less of an endurance contest than the SAT. The SAT is 4 hours. The ACT is 3.5 with the writing. And the ACT, once you're done with a section, you do not return to it. On the SAT, you go back and forth between the critical reading and the math, and then you go back to critical reading and back to math. The ACT does not do that. Once you're done with the math section, you no longer have to do any more math. So, for the ACT, speed is of the essence. On the English section, you need to know those basic grammar rules, but then there are rhetoric questions where, again, you have to understand the text and answer questions based on that. For the math section, there is a little bit more knowledge required in terms of algebra, specifically algebra 2. You do need to know a little bit of trigonometry, maybe a logarithm question, if at all. But for the most part, the math is fairly straightforward. Again, the ACT is not trying to trick the kids into getting the wrong answer. The SAT is. For the reading section of the ACT, it's 35 minutes with 4 passages. It is most common, in fact more common than not, that students run out of time on the reading section. It's 4 passages, and the majority of students only make it through the first 3. So again, speed is the main issue, and the questions are actually quite easy. The tendency is to overthink and spend too much time looking for an answer that is actually far easier to find than people make it out to be. And finally, there's the science section. The science section can be quite misleading. There is no need for any prior knowledge of science in order to do well in the science section of the ACT. In fact, it is merely a data analysis section. You're presented with a sample experiment or some form of data table, and they ask you questions on how to interpret such data. Again, the real issue is not that the questions are hard or that the students don't know what they need to know in order to do well. It's that there is not enough time to finish the entire section. So a majority of students on the science section just run out of time, just like with the math and the English. So, to summarize, the main difference between the two tests is that the SAT is a reasoning test and the ACT is a timing test. If you have any further questions, feel free to contact us. You can find us on the internet, www.andovercollegeprep.com. You can call us at 203-226-6211, or you can email us at info@andovercollegeprep.com. Thank you.